It was the news the world, or at least the part that pays attention to this stuff, had been waiting for. After 471 days of captivity, hostages Romy Gonen, Doron Steinbrecher, and Emily Damari were finally free. That's right, 471 days. Do you know how long that is? It's longer than a Kardashian marriage, that's for sure. Hamas, the militant group that controls the Gaza Strip, released the hostages as part of a ceasefire agreement with Israel. Remember that whole thing? Yeah, well, more on that later. Details about their captivity remain scarce, shrouded in the usual fog of war and misinformation. What we do know is that the hostages endured unimaginable hardship, separated from their loved ones and living under the constant threat of violence. Their release marked a moment of relief and cautious optimism, a flicker of light in a conflict that often seems defined by darkness. But even as families celebrated and diplomats breathed sighs of relief, something about this hostage release felt off. And it wasn't just the fact that it happened after over a year of agonizing silence, it was the parting gift. In a move that could only be described as surreal, Hamas sent the hostages home with gift bags. Yes, you heard that right, gift bags. Like they were leaving a particularly well-catered terrorist summit. And what treasures did these goodie bags contain? Well, alongside the usual assortment of branded pens and stress balls, were some items that were a little more on-brand, let's say. Each bag sported the logo of the Qassam Brigades, the military wing of Hamas. You know, for that extra touch of we're still a militant organization, just one with excellent customer service. Inside, the hostages found a release decision certificate, because apparently, nothing says we're not holding you hostage anymore like a formal document. And just in case the hostages forgot who their gracious hosts were, there were also necklaces and photos, presumably of their time in captivity. Talk about a conversation starter. Naturally, the Israeli Internal Security Agency, or Shin Bet as they like to be called, confiscated these souvenirs faster than you can say security threat. But the damage, if you can call it that, was done. The image of heavily armed militants handing out party favors to their former captives was beamed around the world, leaving everyone to wonder, what the hell was Hamas playing at? Let's be clear, Hamas is a complex organization with a bloody history. They are considered a terrorist group by many countries and for good reason. But they are also a political entity, one that relies on public support to maintain its grip on power. And that's where the gift bags come in. By staging this bizarre act of forced generosity, Hamas was engaging in a calculated PR stunt. They were trying to present themselves as a legitimate governing body, one that abides by certain protocols even when releasing hostages. It was a way of saying, look at us. We're not just a bunch of thugs, we have standards. Of course, not everyone was buying it. Critics were quick to point out the hypocrisy of a group that routinely fires rockets at Israeli civilians trying to rebrand themselves as benevolent captors. And yet, the images were out there, circulating on social media and news channels, planting a seed of doubt in the minds of some. In the world of perception management, even bad publicity can be good publicity. Section 4. A Fragile Peace, the Ceasefire and its Aftermath. The hostage release came on the heels of a ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel, ending a brutal 15-month conflict. This wasn't your run-of-the-mill border skirmish, folks. We're talking full-blown conflict, complete with airstrikes, rocket attacks, and enough civilian casualties to make your stomach churn. The ceasefire, brokered by Egypt after what felt like an eternity of bloodshed, was a fragile thing, held together by the thinnest of threads. For some, the ceasefire represented a long overdue respite from violence, a chance to rebuild lives shattered by the conflict. For others, it was a bitter pill to swallow, a tacit admission that neither side had achieved its objectives. The war had exacted a heavy toll, leaving scars on the land, and in the hearts of those who had lost loved ones. The ceasefire was not a victory for either side, but a grim recognition of the futility of continued fighting. It was a chance, however slim, to explore a different path, one that didn't involve raining death from the skies or firing rockets indiscriminately at civilian populations. Section 5. A future uncertain recruitment and the risk of resurgence. The question on everyone's mind was, would the ceasefire hold? The answer, as with most things in the Middle East, was a resounding "it's complicated." Despite suffering heavy losses in the conflict, Hamas had proven remarkably adept at replenishing its ranks. Young men, fueled by a potent cocktail of anger, despair, and religious fervor, continued to flock to the group's banner. This constant influx of fresh recruits meant that Hamas remained a potent military force, capable of launching attacks and disrupting the fragile peace. The underlying issues that had fueled the conflict, the occupation, the blockade, the lack of a political horizon, remained unresolved. As long as these issues festered, the potential for renewed violence would always be present. The hostage release, with its bizarre gift bags and carefully crafted optics, was a stark reminder that the conflict was far from over. It was a reminder that even in moments of apparent peace, the seeds of future violence were being sown. The world could only watch and hope that somehow, some way, a different future was possible.